There is a house in our neighborhood that feels like it shouldn't exist at all. It stands at the very end of a quiet cul-de-sac, towering over the smaller homes around it like something placed there by mistake. The house is a stunning piece of modern architecture. It has 3 tall stories, huge glass windows that stretch from floor to ceiling, and bright white marble pillars that shine in the sunlight. The lawn is always trimmed perfectly. Strangely, no one has ever seen a gardener working there. It is easily the most beautiful house in the entire city, but there is one problem that has kept the neighborhood uneasy for years. No one lives there. The mansion was finished 5 years ago. During its construction, the entire neighborhood watched as workers came and went day and night. Trucks delivered expensive materials, and cranes lifted massive glass panels into place. When the final pieces were completed, a large for sale sign stood proudly in front of the gate. Then one day the sign was removed. But something strange happened. No moving trucks ever arrived. No family showed up to claim the place. No lights were ever turned on inside the house. No cars ever rolled up the circular driveway. The mansion simply stood there, perfect, spotless, and silent. It looked less like a home and more like a giant glass tomb. Naturally, people in the neighborhood started talking. Some believed the house had been purchased secretly by a billionaire. But as the years passed and the mansion remained empty, the curiosity slowly turned into something darker. People began avoiding walking past it at night. Children stopped riding their bikes near the gate. Eventually, the entire neighborhood started calling it the same thing, the empty palace. For a long time, nothing actually happened there. The house just stood quietly at the end of the street, watching over us like a silent observer. But last month, something changed. The first strange event happened on a Tuesday night at exactly 8 p.m. My neighbor, an elderly man named Mr. Henderson, was the first to notice it. He was sitting peacefully on his porch when he suddenly heard a sound drifting through the evening air. At first, it didn't sound frightening at all. It sounds like it was a music, the soft, delicate sound of a piano playing a beautiful melody. Mr. Henderson stared toward the empty palace in confusion. The tune was coming from the second floor of the mansion. The notes were played perfectly, as if a professional pianist were sitting inside performing for an invisible audience. But there was one big problem. There was no electricity connected to that house, and every window had security shutters locked tightly over them. Mr. Henderson called me over from my yard, and together we stood on the sidewalk staring at the dark building. As we listened, we noticed something else. A faint flicker of light moved slowly behind one of the hallway windows. It looked like someone walking through the house while holding a candle. Maybe someone finally moved in, I said quietly, though even as I spoke, I didn't believe it. Mr. Henderson shook his head slowly. Without a moving truck, he whispered, without opening the front gate. Before either of us could say another word, the piano music stopped. Not gently. It ended with a violent crash of keys, like someone had slammed both hands down on the instrument. Then, a second later, a scream echoed from inside the mansion. But it wasn't a human scream. We didn't stay outside long after that. Both of us rushed back to our homes and locked our doors. At the time, we thought the strange event was over. We were very wrong. The following night, the sound returned at exactly 8 p.m. again. But this time, it didn't seem to be coming from the mansion across the street. It sounded like it was coming from inside my own house. I was sitting in my living room when I heard a heavy noise coming from my kitchen. My heart began pounding as I grabbed a flashlight and slowly walked toward the kitchen. The room was empty when I stepped inside. Nothing had fallen, nothing had moved, but the sound continued. A strange, wet sliding noise echoed from somewhere inside the walls of the house, like something crawling through the narrow spaces behind the plaster. I ran out of my house immediately. To my horror, every single neighbor on the street was already outside. People stood in their driveways wearing pajamas and robes, their faces pale with fear. Mr. Henderson looked especially shaken. His hands were trembling as he explained what had happened inside his home. He said he heard someone crying in his bathtub, but when he pulled the shower curtain aside, the tub was completely dry. Still, the entire bathroom smelled like rotten water. That was the moment we all realized something terrifying. The sounds from the empty palace were no longer staying inside that house. They were spreading into ours. For the next week, the neighborhood became a living nightmare. Every night at exactly 8 p.m., the noises began again. Children's laughter echoed from basements that were completely empty. But the worst thing we experienced was something we began calling the gaze. Whenever someone looked out their window toward the empty palace at night, they felt an overwhelming sensation of being watched. Even though the mansion remained completely dark, it felt like thousands of invisible eyes were staring back through the glass. Eventually, some neighbors called the police. When officers arrived, they searched the mansion themselves. They even broke the lock on the front door and invited us inside to prove nothing strange was happening. The interior was breathtaking. The rooms were filled with expensive furniture, polished marble floors, and priceless artwork. Everything was spotless, without a single speck of dust anywhere. No sign that anyone had ever been living there. The police laughed at us before leaving, calling us paranoid neighbors. But the moment their patrol cars disappeared down the street, the clock struck 8 p.m. Suddenly, the front door of the mansion slammed, shut with such force that the glass panels shattered across the floor. That was the night we heard the digging. Inside every house on the street, people heard the same horrifying sound beneath their floors. It sounded like shovels digging into dirt deep below our homes. The noise continued for hours. None of us dared stay inside. We gathered together in the middle of the street, watching the empty palace in silence. And under the moonlight, the white marble walls of the mansion looked strange. 3 days ago, the digging finally stopped. Now everything is quiet, and many of us are planning to leave the neighborhood as soon as possible. But this morning, when I tried to start my car, the engine didn't sound normal. Instead of the rumble of a motor, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A piano, playing that same beautiful, haunting melody. And now I'm starting to fear something terrible. By the time we finally escape this street, we may not truly be ourselves anymore. We may simply become more silent, beautiful pieces of that perfect, empty house, a house that was never meant for the living. There is a small town hidden deep in a valley where the fog never truly disappears. The mist hangs over the streets day and night, clinging to the trees and rooftops like it belongs there. It's the kind of place that doesn't show up on most maps. And if you ask people from nearby counties about it, they usually tell you to keep driving and not stop. I grew up in that town, but I left 10 years ago after something terrible happened at the local mine. The officials called it flood and said 9 miners were trapped underground overnight. When rescue teams finally managed to break through the collapsed tunnels the next day, they only recovered 5 bodies. The other 4 miners were never found. My name is Sarah, and I returned to the valley to settle my mother's estate after she passed away. It was the first time I had stepped back into that town since my brother Jonah disappeared during the chaos that followed the mine disaster. The police told us Jonah probably ran away. They said the town was full of panic after the collapse and that people sometimes vanish during tragedies like that. The moment my car passed the rusted welcome sign at the edge of the valley, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. A low vibration traveled through the air, so faint that someone unfamiliar with the place might not even notice it. But I knew exactly what it was. It was the hum. At night, it sounds through the streets like a distant engine buried deep underground. Dogs begin to howl uncontrollably when it grows louder, sometimes until their voices give out. Old tube radios start spitting bursts of static even when they aren't plugged in. The locals have a name for it. They call it the hollow hum. According to them, it began the very night the mine flooded. On my first night back in my mother's house, sleep refused to come. The air felt thick and dim, and the walls seemed to creak with every movement of the fog outside. Around midnight, I heard something strange. It wasn't a knock at the door or a sound from the street. It was a tapping. The sound was steady and rhythmic, and it seemed to be coming from directly beneath my bed. My heart pounded as I grabbed a flashlight and climbed out from under the blankets. I knelt beside the bed and carefully lifted one of the loose floorboards that had always been there since I was a child. The crawl space underneath was filled with dust and old wooden beams, but something else was there too. There was a scrap of denim fabric. My breath caught in my throat as I reached down and picked it up. As I examined the fabric, I know it belonged to Jonah. He had worn that jacket constantly when we were kids. I remembered my mother sewing a patch onto the sleeve after he tore it climbing a fence. But what terrified me most was the condition of the cloth. It wasn't old or moldy. The fabric looked fresh, like someone had placed it there only a day earlier. The next morning, I drove straight to the abandoned mine. The wooden gate blocking the entrance had been damaged long ago, and the planks were covered with scratches and carving. Someone had carved a list of names into the wood over the years. Curious and uneasy, I ran my fingers across the mark. Then I felt my stomach drop. I saw Jonah Voss. His name had been carved into the wood, and it's twice. Later that afternoon, I met an old man named Eli who used to work as an engineer in the mine. His eyes were sunken, and he looked like a man who hadn't slept properly in years. When I told him about the tapping and the denim jacket, his expression turned pale. The flood wasn't water, he said quietly, lighting a trembling cigarette. The miners broke into something down there, something older than the mountains themselves. He leaned closer to me and lowered his voice. A void, he whispered, not empty space, hunger, and the hum you hear. That's it breathing. Eli explained that whatever existed beneath the mine fed on memory. It took people, and over time it slowly erased them from the minds of the living. The longer someone was trapped down there, the harder it became to remember them. Have you noticed the gap yet? Eli asked. I opened my mouth to answer, but then I froze. I suddenly realized I couldn't remember the color of Jonah's eyes. I could picture his smile and hear his laugh, but his eyes were blank in my memory, like a photograph slowly fading in the sun. That night Eli and I decided to enter the mine together. We used an old map Jonah had drawn when he was a kid. Inside the mine, everything felt wrong. The air was thick and heavy, almost like breathing through warm water. Even the beam of my flashlight looked strange, bending slightly in the darkness as if the tunnel walls were warping the light. Eventually, we reached a large chamber deep underground. The dirt walls looked almost alive, slowly pulsing like a heartbeat beneath the earth. Then the whispers began. Thousands of faint voices filled the air around us. They weren't speaking word exactly, but fragments of memories. Laughter, conversations, half-forgotten names. Shapes moved in the darkness beyond the light. They looked like people, but their movements were stiff and jerky, like broken puppets. Then I saw someone standing on the rusted train tracks that ran through the chamber. It was Jonah. He looked exactly as he had the day he vanished 10 years ago. His hair, his clothes, even the same expression. But his eyes were wrong. They were bright and empty, like glass marbles. I ran toward him and grabbed his hand. His skin felt warm, but it was strangely smooth, like something artificial. Jonah, I whispered. It's me, Mara. We're going home. For a brief moment, something flickered across his face. Then he began speaking, but instead of answering me, he started listing names, birthdays, addresses, pieces of memories that didn't belong to him. I leaned close to Jonah and whispered a secret from our childhood. It was small and embarrassing. A private moment involving a broken toy and a lie we once told our mother. No one else in the world knew that story. The moment I finished speaking, the entire chamber began to shake. The hum exploded into a deafening scream. Our flashlights shattered, and the ground trembled violently beneath our feet. Run, Eli shouted. We sprinted toward the exit as rocks began collapsing around us. Just as we reached the entrance, the tunnel behind us caved in completely, sealing the mine forever. The hum stopped instantly. The silence that followed felt unnatural. That night, Jonah came home with me. Some of his memories slowly returned. He remembered the kite patch on his jacket. He remembered the willow tree in our backyard. But the price was terrible. As Jonah regained his memories, the rest of the town began losing theirs. People woke up unable to remember their wedding days or even the names of their own children. The mine had taken its payment from the entire valley. A month later, I left the town again and took Jonah with me. He's quieter now, and sometimes he stares at foggy skies for far too long. In my glove compartment, I keep a small tin box filled with scraps of paper. On each one, I've written down memories. Everything I can remember about our family, our childhood, and the life we once had. There is a very specific kind of silence that only exists in places where people were. never meant to live. It's the kind of silence that feels heavy. We found that silence at the edge of a forgotten valley, where an old Victorian manor slowly sank into the soft peat of a gray, lifeless marsh. My name is Maya, and I had gone there with 4 of my closest college friends: John, Priya, Ben, and Elena. We had rented the manor for a long weekend, so we could finish filming our senior project. The house looked perfect for our horror film, isolated, decaying, and surrounded by endless fog from the marsh. At the time, we thought the isolation would help us focus. What we didn't know was that the manor had been built on the ruins of a 1930s sanatorium, a place where the so-called treatments were far more disturbing than the illnesses they were meant to cure. The locals in the nearby town told strange stories about the place. They spoke about a massive fire that had destroyed the East Wing decades ago and about patients whose bodies were never found afterward. We laughed at the stories at first, assuming they were just exaggerated local legends meant to scare outsiders. That confidence disappeared on our first night. While we were setting up our filming equipment in the old parlor, Ben discovered a loose floorboard near the fireplace. Curious, he pried it open. Hidden underneath was a leather-bound journal covered in dust. The first page revealed it belonged to a nurse named Ruth who had worked at the sanatorium many years earlier. At first, the entries seemed normal. Ruth wrote about long shifts, difficult patients, and the harsh environment of the facility. But as we kept reading, the tone of her writing changed. She described a strange medical practice the doctors had started calling memory cleansing. According to her notes, the doctors believed the human mind could be repaired by forcing patients to relive their most painful memories again and again until their spirit finally broke. The deeper we read, the worse it became. Ruth wrote that the patients weren't recovering. They are becoming empty, as if something inside them had been hollowed out. Her handwriting grew more frantic with every page. The final entry was stained with something dark and dry. It read, "They keep their memories when the skin folds. They hide them where the light cannot reach. Don't let them whisper into yours." That was the first moment the house started to feel wrong. Later that night, we reviewed the footage we had filmed earlier in the day. At first everything looked normal, but then we noticed something disturbing in the background of several shots. They were faces, pale figures standing in the shadows of hallways, thin shapes peering through cracked windows. They hadn't been there when we were filming, yet somehow, the camera had captured them. The following morning we discovered something even stranger. Every one of us had the exact same nightmare. In the dream we were running across the marsh toward the house while something heavy dragged itself across the wooden bridge behind us. When we woke up, each of us found a crescent-shaped bruise somewhere on our bodies. The skin smelled faintly like stagnant water and dead fish. Ben was the first person who began to change. He started sleepwalking during the night. His eyes were open, but he seemed completely unaware of his surroundings. During the day, he would sit quietly and sketch the same thing over and over again. A long, narrow hallway filled with iron doors. The strange part was that the hallway didn't exist anywhere in the house. Ben also became obsessed with the basement door. He kept it locked and often whispered to the floorboards as if someone beneath them could hear him. Around the same time, John discovered an old cassette player in the attic. Out of curiosity, he pressed play. What came out of the speaker froze us all. It was the voice of John's father. The two of them hadn't spoken in years, and yet the tape sounded exactly like him. The voice begged for forgiveness, saying things John had never heard his father say in real life. It felt like the house was pulling secrets from the past and playing them back just to torment us. Elena started experiencing something even stranger. She would disappear for nearly an hour at a time, and then return without remembering where she had gone. Her shoes were always soaked with marsh water when she came back. Her camera held dozens of photos she didn't remember taking. The images showed rooms covered in thick green algae, rooms that didn't exist inside the manor. Priya tried to explain everything logically. She believed we were all suffering from stress and exhaustion. But that belief ended one night when she woke up screaming. On the back of her leg was a deep red mark shaped exactly like the foundation of the house. At the same time, a new sentence had appeared in Ruth's journal. The ink looked fresh, We made a pact with the marsh, it said. It keeps what we bury. Trade memories for silence. Terrified, we rushed into the nearby town and searched the library for records about the sanatorium. What we found was horrifying. One of the doctors there had performed a disturbing procedure he called folding. He believed traumatic memories could be physically forced into the folds of human skin or transferred to another person entirely. Wealthy families secretly paid him to erase the memories of relatives they didn't want anymore. When the fire destroyed the building, those memories didn't disappear. They sank into the peat of the marsh. The manor had been built directly on top of it. The thing beneath the marsh was feeding on those trapped memories, and now it was marking us as new hosts. We tried to escape, but the wooden bridge leading away from the property had warped strangely. Every time we crossed it, the road somehow led us back to the front gates of the manor. Our phones only produced static. Desperate, we followed a strange ritual mentioned in the journal. Each of us buried an object representing our deepest secrets in the marsh. For a moment, the water rippled as if thousands of fingers were moving beneath the surface. The house became silent, but it was only a trap. At midnight, we gathered in the parlor and decided to fight back. We sat in a circle and began shouting every secret, every mistake, and every shame we had ever hidden. We refused to let the house own them. The manor began to shake violently. The floor split open, and pale hands burst upward from the darkness. They grabbed our ankles, trying to drag us down. But Atlas, at dawn we escaped. We all survived, but Priya was never the same again. Her skin became thin and almost transparent, and sometimes you can see faint shapes moving beneath it. Months later, I reviewed our old footage, hoping to understand what happened. In one frame I know I never filmed. A nurse's hand slowly reached out of the darkness and pressed against the camera lens, and still now, I can't figure out what happened in that manner.